Howdy, Smite fans, and welcome back to the Smite Pro League week 3, day number 2. I'm combining more words already. We're off to a great start. And all of this fun can be brought to you by our good friends over at Prime Gaming. Make sure that you are making the most out of your Prime membership by linking your Twitch account to get all of the great free stuff that Twitch Prime has to offer to you and to Prime Gaming. If any of those games in that trailer from earlier satisfied your interest, you should probably pick them up because there's only a few days left in the month before those games are gone and a whole new catalog of games for next month will come back around, as well as exclusive content and all the other games that you may have already been playing, as well as all the great things that a Prime membership can get you in general. Free shipping, music, movies, and more can be to you. So make sure that you get your Prime membership going. And thank you so much to Prime for powering us in Season 9 of the Smite Pro League. My name is J-Mac. I got Trelly joining me on the desk one more time. We are here for our SCC set to start the day, and now we jump into the SPL. And what a day that we've got in store for us, Trelly, is 4 big teams going to be facing off here. It's the Tartarus Titans and the Camelot Kings to start the day, and the Atlantis Leviathans and the Bolts immediately after. What a Saturday of Smite we've got in store for us.
That is a Saturday of Smite, no doubt. The Tartarus Titans versus the Camelot Kings is how we're going to headline our evening. I guess not evening quite yet. It's about afternoon.
Evening somewhere.
Afternoon. It'll be an evening eventually, either way. It's going to be an interesting one, man. Looking at the matchup, I have to say, it's going to be an interesting one.
Yeah, it's definitely the way to put that there. If you missed the action yesterday, Tartarus Titans did play in our first setup against the Solar Scarabs. It was a 2-1. The Olympus Bolts closed out a 2-0 over against the Valkyries. Now we jump into Saturday with the Titans and the Kings and the Atlantis Leviathans and the Olympus Bolts coming back again. So Titans started yesterday, Bolts ended yesterday, and we get to have the same thing but with 2 other teams in their place. And then Sunday we'll have the Kings and the Leviathans back to face off yet again, the Valks and the Warriors, and the Scarabs and the Dragons to close our week out. So the only time that we will see the Jade Dragons will be for that final set of the week. And taking a look at the standings, this is a big one for the Camelot Kings. They're the only other team besides the Olympus Bolts to still remain undefeated in the SPL, sitting 3-0. A win over the Titans means that they'll go back up to being in that #1 spot with the Olympus Bolts at that 4-0. So the Tartarus Titans have a chance to play spoiler here.
Yeah, and then they would also overtake the Camelot Kings in the placements, which
True.
would be massive for them. But right now, if you're the Camelot Kings, you want to stay undefeated with the Bolts right there. Both of these squads making sure, keep your eyes there. But the Titans in particular have been looking very strong and shaking up the whole meta of the way that we're playing Smite is Tartarus Titans in the solo lane, SOT. On the back of this, I'm not going to say the Robin pick in general because I think his whole catalog of gods definitely shakes things up, but the way he's been playing just in general, man, it's just been unstoppable. He just looks so dominant in lane. When he rotates out, he's always so ahead, and it's difficult to deal with.
Yeah, SOT has really become a menace. Is finally starting to find his footing with this team. You know, at the start of last phase, Tartarus Titans a little bit shaky, trying to still adapt to their new solo laner jumping in. But now that SOT has been able to find his way into this squad, now that SOT has been able to really get his footing going, this Robin pick that's kind of popped itself up. Now 3 games that SOT has gotten to play it. And all 3 of those games, a dominant performance, a 7-1-6, a 4-3-10, and a 5-1-8. And it's a pick that is not just something that SOT is willing to play. I got to imagine that every solo laner in the league, we saw Haddox already run it one time, but I got to imagine every solo laner has their eyes on this pick.
And this is what I'm talking about. I think the Tartarus Titans and SOT in particular are changing the way that the Smite meta is being played as of now. They had a very strong performance with like the Chernobog solo, that sort of thing, and now this Robin pick is being looked at. It's being picked or banned because people don't know how to stop it. They don't know how to deal with it. We've seen it fall a few times. It certainly is not unstoppable. We've seen it die. But if you're putting that much presence into the solo laner, usually the carries, Paul and Cyclone Spin, are going to be looking super solid on top of that. You just can't put that much presence, that much just raw 5v5 damage into the solo laner.
And speaking of kind of new picks making its way into the solo lane, Variety has also been starting to make some waves with the assassin solos. The Ratatoskr has become a popular pick for him. King Arthur, also a notable pick that he has been running more often than not in the last 6 games played. Half of those have been King Arthur. 2 of the other 3 have been the Ratatoskr, and then 1 on that Osiris. So really when it comes down to these solo laners, it comes down to kind of meta defining more than anything else. How are these 2 players, SOT, how is Variety, specifically with the Kings, going to shape up the meta for his team, and how is he going to be that frontline presence? This King Arthur, now that it's popped its way back in, a signature pick for Variety to really dominate on.
Yeah, I like these style of picks for Variety a lot better than what we were seeing, you know, previously in like Masters land, stuff like that. He just is so dominant on the Warriors. Well, like the Bologna comes to mind, for example. Anything that he can really dive to that back line and just be a complete menace, unkillable god, that sort of thing, it's just where he looks so smart, and I think it's where the rest of the Kings also follow suit. Obviously, they're 3-0 right now, so we've been seeing a lot of this, where Variety is able to get to that back line, make sure that the carries of whatever team he's on is just being continuously looked at, and he just looks unstoppable as well. So putting two immovable objects up against each other will be an interesting one. It really is going to be a battle of, I think, picks and bans specifically. Both of these teams are going to have to look towards the solo lane at least a little bit. Focusing out like Captain Twig is one thing, but Variety's also there, and he can deal with SOT pretty well.
Yeah, I think that clashing in the solo lane is definitely one thing that we'll be keeping our eyes on throughout the entirety of the set, throughout the entirety of the game and whatnot. But before we jump into the picks and bans, before we jump into the game, we did get a chance to sit down and talk to Genetics from the Camelot Kings to see what he has to say about the set.
So far in the phase, we've done pretty well. I think we've beaten every team we expected to beat, and I think this next week's going to be the big teller of whether we're as good as we think we are. I think Twig's started coming into his own a lot now. He's playing a lot of different gods. He's having a really good KDA. I think Ben's looking pretty fantastic. Titans are really good. They lost against Oni Warriors. I think that's probably their worst matchup, and I think Titans typically do pretty well against us, and it's kind of our hardest matchup in the grand scheme of things. So they've done pretty well, but against us, it's going to be an interesting match no matter what happens. So the Titans' identity, I'd say, is drafting. I think they're probably better than us at drafting for the most part, but they're very, very good at that. So usually when it comes to our matchup, whoever gets the better draft typically wins.
So a heavy emphasis on drafting for Genetics says that the Tartarus Titans are one of the better teams when it comes to the drafting stage. It's a team that might be a little bit better than them, and that kind of echoes a little bit of what you were talking about here when it comes to the solo lane matchup, just the play on field in general. I mean, the last time that we saw the Tartarus Titans up against the Scarabs yesterday, they were able to get Chernobog 3 games in a row, and that's not something that you typically want to do. The Tartarus Titans just have a way with being able to really control these picks and bans. We'll see if they can do that here as picks and bans for game number 1 are ready to go between these two teams. And one thing to note is that BMT is not actually in the studio with the Kings this time around. He's going to be playing back from home in the UK instead. So might be expecting to get some of those more easy to execute style of gods for that mid lane for him.
Yeah, this was the first ban I certainly expected coming the way of the Camelot Kings, and I think the Chernobog will follow suit. A lot of big brains on the side of the Kings, and I think that they have done their homework and they know what they need to do to try and upset the momentum that the Titans have built for them. The Robin, certainly something to start with, but E-Set actually is going to be the next option. The Titans pick Umoja, but E-Set is doing the second ban here from the Kings. Paul has looked so solid on this. Whenever I'm casting a Titans game, I always look out for those Spirit Balls, and they always are landing consistently. So much damage, and that usually starts the engage. So another pick that is just going to offset the momentum of the Titans. And since they're not first pick, the Titans actually have to ban that Chernobog away because they don't want to risk it going over to the Kings.
Yeah, definitely don't want to give Netroid something not only that he's comfortable on, but also something that he can play just to a high degree and just a high-performing god in general. The last bands through Osiris, Umoja, and Freya will be the final one for the Tartarus Titans. So again, making sure that Netroid isn't comfortable on something. And the Camelot Kings will go with their support pick first and foremost. Khepri going to be the first god through, but a lot is still open for the Tartarus Titans. I mean, with just the E-Set ban, Yu Huang immediately the first one that comes to mind is something that Paul can pick up for his team.
Yeah, Paul's a big fan of the Yu Huang. And since the E-Set's gone, won't have any problem with that. The question is, who are they trying to prioritize here? With the Osiris ban, that's essentially a ban versus Layers and SOT, so a great option there. And they will just grab the Bellona in that slot. Again, something I highlighted already that Variety likes a lot, so that worked as a pseudo ban, still leaving King Arthur open, things like that. But the Yu Huang and the Bellona, so getting SOT on something he's extremely comfortable on, taking that away from Variety, and then just getting Paul one of, if not the premier mid laner in the current Smite Pro league. Just the way that things have been going, that meta just suits Yu Huang quite well.
Yeah, those first early levels where the Titans like to play very aggressive for levels 1 through 5 has been very successful when they can get this Yu Huang. On the opposite side, Camelot Kings go for a Chiron pick.
A very early Chiron.
Yeah, it's not like a lot of teams are trying to go towards Chiron. I say that there's been 12 picks of Chiron already this phase, but hasn't seen a whole lot of success. This, however, is one that does make a little bit more sense in a top 3. Nemesis made her way through. On the opposite side, I'm still seeing that Mercury is available if the Titans want to go towards it, and they will do so.
Yeah, that's the first time we're seeing the Merc make it this way through bans, at least that I've seen in Nemesis. I think when you're looking at more of these counter-style picks, like the counter-style bans, I should say, like the Robin, like the E-Set, things like the Mercury and the Nemesis and the Yu Huang and the Khepri, those are going to get through. So I think the battle right now in the minds of both of these teams are, what can we give up so that we could also get something of equal value. Khepri obviously very valued by the Kings. I don't think they were too worried about this Mercury pick. Captain Twig, is fine with it, and Layers is very solid on it, but maybe just thinking other picks are going to bring more value. Second wave of bans coming through. The Cacolin for the Titans will be taken away, so still King Arthur on the table at the moment. The Kings, however, are going to take away that Xing Chen. A lot of auto attackers already locked in for the Kings, and the Chiron and the Nemesis, so not wanting to do a Furious Roar, probably a smart play.
And a ban of the Poseidon alongside that Cacolin from the Tartarus Titans, so making sure to put big man Tings a little bit further behind on a pick there. And that Chiron, still some flexibility, whether that one goes to the mid or whether that one goes in towards the dual lane. We'll have to wait and see what the rest of the Kings draft looks like before we can maybe put a hit on exactly where that one will land out. Tartarus Titans now with the Kumbhakarna and the Xing Chen banned away are going to have to go a little bit further for Aurora to find a pick, though. Ganesh, one that immediately comes to mind whenever I think of Aurora as a player. That's one that he is like to flex over towards more often than not when given the opportunity. But instead, at least for now, it will be a Cabrakan locked in. So Bologna, Merc, and Cabrakan as some of your initiators. I mean, how do you feel about the Cabrakan up against these three in the comp of the Kings?
Yeah, none of them like the walls here, and I think that Cabrakan has a decent time into Khepri, not really caring about Abduct too much. You can always have your stun available in that case, and also doesn't care too much about the Ardio. The root is not going to be an issue either. I will say a few of these characters, Mercury for example, are going to care about that cripple field from the Ardio, so going to have to watch out for that, as Neath is the option. So double ability-based hunters on the back of the Nemesis for some prod shred, that Khepri for some prod shred. An interesting composition here from the Kings. They don't have too much magical damage, but with 2 Guardians and an RDO, I don't think we'll be lacking that much. The Titans now have the option. I was going to say the Jing Wei is still open, but Ho Yi is actually going to be the last lock-in here for the Titans. Maybe just wanting some more team fight presence with that ultimate, not just auto attacks, bringing the Suns into question, some stunning, that sort of thing is what the Titans are prioritizing, and just overall safety in that lane. How you can usually leap and clear out a big portion of space to run away from that Nemesis.
And so now with the look at the drafts and maybe talking about some of the team fight phase, I mean, the Tartarus Titans have been playing a lot of early game presence against the Scarabs. It was kind of a mid-late game style of play until that game 3 against the Scarabs, where the Titans decided to finally draft themselves something earlier on. But the Kings with their last set up against the Scarabs prior, it was nothing but early game. It was a 20-minute game number 1, a 28-minute game number 2. So when it comes down to the team fight of these ones, where do you kind of give your edge to, Trelly?
I mean, the team fight itself, I think that the Kings have a great way of just, getting picks beforehand. I don't think in a 5v5 you're not charging World Weaver. You usually want to charge that ult out beforehand, send that Centaurus down range, and use all of the abilities of your hunters to make sure you can at least poke down the enemies before you start that 5v5. But looking at the Sonic Boom, I think Layers can get a lot of value here from this Mercury specifically, as long as you're getting ahead, camping that solo lane. I think Variety's gonna have to play pretty far back as the RDO. If you do want to TP, which usually he does like to get, you're gonna have to watch out for that ult, because so much CC coming the way of the Bologna and the Mercury specifically. You're gonna have to play your solo lane pretty far back, I would say, but Variety's used to that, so I don't think it's gonna be too big of a problem.
And something you brought up earlier, the fact the Kings have drafted not just 2 hunters, but 2 ability-based hunters, means that damage against objectives might be a little bit lower than what some teams are used to, where you don't have a traditional crit style of play out there. I mean, you could obviously see things like Fail not kind of pop its way through if you want to jump its way onto there, but because it's more ability focused, does this give maybe a little bit more over to the Titans when it comes to some of this objective play?
Yeah, definitely. I don't think the Camelot Kings will be able to bait as easy as you'd think, because of the fact that they have these ability-based hunters that just can't burn it as fast. You're looking at a Mercury, you're looking at a Ho Yi, as well as some Yu Huang for burst, so the objective burn and confirm has to go the way of the Tartarus Titans, but the Kings know that. They knew that going in. I'm sure they have a way to work around that with their baits, around objectives, that sort of thing. And they still do have a Nemesis, so they have a good bit of auto attack damage there anyways. As long as they're playing a pick style of composition with the World Weaver off the back of this Neath, I think they should be just fine.
Tartarus Titans with this Mercury, we've seen exactly what it can do when it gets to late game team fights. We've seen the kind of ganks that it can make, and we'll see if the Tartarus Titans can convert this draft into a win, or can the Camelot Kings maintain their pressure. We'll throw it over to game number 1 with Dulcin and Mifflin.
This Saturday in the SPL is truly must-watch Smite, and it starts right here, right now, with the Tartarus Titans taking on the Camelot Kings. Teams vying to remain undefeated up top, and teams trying to keep pace with the top of the league. Kings versus Titans, Miff, what a way to start off this Saturday. And I love the draft that the Kings come in with here, because I'm a massive fan of big man Tings and this build specifically. I'm such a sucker for it. I am biased 100%.
Wow.
For this draft specifically. because I am such a fan of the late game Mannequin Scepter. You upgrade to Hidden Blade. You're one-tapping carries with the World Weaver. I just love the way that kit works.
And it should help out a fair bit that it's incredibly low execution in the late game. Get Big Man Pings to level 20, get him to full build. He's landing that ultimate despite playing on ping today. So I think it makes sense for the Camelot Kings. I am curious, though, when we have Sing Tings go towards this god and build, he generally forgoes the Rune-Forged Hammer. And I know what you guys are thinking at home, like Rune-Forged, hard CC, like how's that help? Turns out Rune-Forge applies its passive before Hidden Blade does. So you're just getting 20% more damage off your ultimate every single time.
Oh my god.
So you're sacrificing auto attack and ability in exchange for even more one-shot.
Yeah, are you saying Big Man Tings, hold on, as Blink onto Twig. Level 1 feels good for Yu Huang, feels great for Paul. And the Titans will grab first blood, and that is a simple blink in and execute the play from the Titans.
People they sleep on Yu Huang. Doesn't it seem like that's happening too often? Every game. Yeah, Big Man Tings even. In a little bit of trouble there. Yu Huang really only has the ability to make plays like that levels 1 through 3, and then you wait till level 15 to do it again. So, awesome for the Tartarus Titans to get off to a roaring start, especially with this slower build for Paul, looking towards that Warlock staff in the first slot. This is going to open up the door for Layers to kind of ignore the mid lane if he so chooses, which is exactly what Mercury wants. He would love to make his rotation over towards the duo lane as soon as possible. Generally, the second you tick over to level 5, Sonic Boom, just so dominant at ganking. You don't have to worry about the wards in the jungle because Mercury's the only god that ganks through the lane itself. And now that Paul's playing Yu Huang with the lead, with First Blood Gold Bounty for himself as well, leave him alone. That's just a very safe pick. He doesn't need any more help.
Yeah, what a dynamic jungle matchup. Of course, between Layers and Twig, yes. But the way these ganks will be happening, of course, a massive Sonic Boom, you run down the lane, tail as old as time. But the way that the Kings love to play this Neath, especially with a Nemesis, is I imagine Miff will see Twig run into a lane, drop the ultimate on someone right when Tings is ulting, and you're just going to get this massive burst damage. And so it's such a unique game as far as gank styles, I think, between both Layers and Captain Twig, where all of the laners have got to keep their head on a swivel at any given time. Either getting Sonic Boomed or you're getting World Weavered into Retribution. It just feels like these junglers should have an impact.
The way for the Tartarus Titans to deal with that Wombo combo from the Kings is to have the fight happen in mid. Doesn't really matter if Big Man Tings has a global ultimate if he's fighting on top of himself, right? So if the Tartarus Titans want to ignore that style of play in mid. Does not play to the strengths of Mercury incredibly well. The Camelot Kings, on the other hand, I think it's more so a counter gank style. If Captain Twig can get to Layers after Layers has already used the dash, Mercury doesn't win that 1v1, and he doesn't really have any great ways to deal with Captain Twig besides the second ability having slow immunity on it, which should help him run away a bit. But as long as Twig is playing reactive and wherever Layers is trying to gank, it could make it a lot harder for the Tartarus Titans to execute on their pick style composition. But you are right to say that it is a unique and dynamic matchup, and that both of these drafts are very good at just working their way to these side lanes and looking for those picks.
There's a slight XP lead for Big Man Tings, even though Paul got first blood. Layers was in mid for about half more of a wave than Captain Twig was. So level 5 reach now by the Neath. Some scale time needed for both of the mid laners. Warlock staff for Paul is what we assume. Transcendence for Big Man Tings, of course. But at level 5, the dynamic of the match changes completely for all the reasons we just listed and more. So you got Beads not on Variety, and he will get up-downed by SOT. World Weaver is in from mid as well, and Variety has found the first kill of the game for the Kings, but it is immediately answered back by Sot. Does not want to fight Captain Twig any further in a 1-for-1 trade on right.
So that's exactly what we were talking about just a minute ago. Have Captain Twig essentially be the gatekeeper for Layers. It's not so much that Twig needs to play his own game, it's, hey, I'm going to make sure Layers isn't playing his. And every time this Mercury ults in, if he's getting slammed by the Retribution, if he's getting slammed by Big Man Ting's ultimate, what we just saw is going to be a rinse-repeat situation. Fortunately for the Tartarus Titans, SOT nearby, and able to finish off that kill, so maybe a slight advantage in the lane over to him.
Netrioid stunned, but just gallops out of the wall in the other direction. You thought you had an initiation if you're Cyclone Spin and a Roar, but not able to cage up Netrioid, who will be just fine. And Miff, we have not seen that much Chiron lately. Saw a little bit during the set you and I casted yesterday here in the SPL, but it's fallen a bit by the wayside. A double ability-based build that seems like we'll get here between Tings and Netrioid.
Yeah, I'm curious how that's going to pan out around objectives. It's really going to make you struggle without going towards any sort of crit in your itemization to finish off Fire Giants or Gold Furies, even in situations where you are finding the advantage in the fight itself. So I think Trelly and JMac bring up Fail Not as an option for both Big Man Tings and Netrioid. Would be surprised if that's not picked up by at least one of them to help out around these neutrals. But Chiron, holistically, I think, really has only fallen by the wayside because of his lack of safety comparatively, right? Heimdall's got a global teleport and a CC immune dash, Jingwei, everything that she's got for herself. So in a meta where the dual lane, for the most part, has been left alone, you really want to have something that's not going to fall behind, and those style of picks really are good for that. But it seems like Netrioid, being the most soloingest hunter in the league, probably looking for that style of play. And
you would
Cyclone Spin doesn't shy away from the 1v1, which is why we see the Ho Yeet.
Yep, Netrioid would love to get some of that burst damage down early in this game, but assuming we'll also need some time to stack up in Transcendence early on. So after a bit of a stumble early, Captain Twig has been able to make an impact on the right side of the map, scrapping with layers a bit, but Oracles will end up getting split. The point I was making prior to that right side, the solo lane gank that we saw, is beads for Cyclone Spin and Paul, yes. None of the other three members of the Tartarus Titans have beads at their disposal. And so maybe those Myth are some targets that the King should be looking for. Let's see if we can ult Sot. Let's see if we can catch layers a bit out of sorts. As hard as it might be to lock down a Mercury, Aurora may be potentially susceptible as well.
But looking at the Camelot Kings draft, I think layers in particular, that's the most indicative of whether or not you feel safe in the early portions of the game. The fact that he's going towards Blink is hitting the hard CC of the Camelot Kings pretty limited. The only things you're really worried about, maybe a stun from Variety, but Variety seldom rotates before around level 15 or so. Genetics with Abduct, but outside of that, you've got slows from Twig, maybe a giddy up from Netrioid, and if Netrioid's dashing at layers, you probably already won the team fight.
Right.
So low CC composition from the Kings allows some of these members of the Tartarus Titans to go towards this more aggressive relic in the first slot. It's not often you see a Mercury with Blink, because generally he doesn't need it. Sonic Boom's your gap close, so I'm curious to see how Layers utilizes it. 8 levels in, still haven't seen a Blink just yet.
Yeah, that's a great point. We've put, I mean, for good reason, we've put a lot of emphasis on the World Weaver and the Retribution. We'll see if that combo happens here. It sure does. Eagles rally, though. Well timed by Sot. Actually shrugs off the stun. And so there's a bit of counterplay for you on the right side of the map. Sot able to jump out of that just fine. Big Man Tings actually might wish he had World Weaver right now to send towards Aurora, but Aurora should be dead nonetheless. Now, that's not something we've seen in a little while, Myth.
Whoa. Oh.
Well, you gotta...
Don't do it to him.
He's gonna get him. There you go. Netrioid gets the kill nonetheless. That's not something we've seen in a little while. A support just straight up dying for the Obelisk. It happened all the time when the Scepter was around. That's my first exposure to that in the last few weeks.
I think Aurora's just saying, hey, 3-man presence on the right side of the map, maybe I could steal away some of these, but overzealous. Once Genetics shows up, you got to realize there's probably some follow-up heading your way as well. Roar sticks around a bit too long. Had he been able to give himself a little bit more space, like dodge out one more auto attack, a blink out, could have very easily escaped in that situation, but the auto attack's good from Netrioid. Will keep Aurora in combat and eventually finish off that kill. But look at the gold disparity already. Generally, it's the Camelot Kings on the better end of just the neutral farm. The Tartarus Titans find it early.
Cyclone Spin gets a stun and some damage from the ultimate on an Netrioid. Has to use the beads because an Abduct from Genetics hit its mark, but Cyclone Spin is jumping in. It's because Layers is charging up the Sonic Boom. It'll connect onto Genetics, who'll get sent right back towards Cyclone Spin. A Scarab's Blessing dashes only as far as the wall, but the kill is just not finished off. How has Genetics not died? Cyclone Spin able to up down onto Netrioid, and at least we'll get a kill. That was far from as clean as the Titans were hoping for, and that shows you the disruption of a Scarab's Blessing. The Titans do grab a kill nonetheless.
Yeah, I wonder how many active frames Scarab's Blessing really had there. I mean, I feel like he just barely got out of the stun, got it off, survives for himself, but essentially baits Netrioid out of position. Net doesn't want to see Genetics goes down immediately after using his ultimate, so tries to create some space at the sacrifice of his own life. So even in a admittedly sloppy gank that isn't as clean as you would hope for the Tartarus Titans, they got the better of the 2 targets on accident.
Yep, they ended up getting the kill that they weren't going for, but the kill maybe that they were hoping for. And so the Tartarus Titans able to find impact over on the left side of the map. And what you need to see from layers on this Mercury, we saw a lot of, some variety, I suppose, of junglers yesterday for layers, but his fans will love the Mercury style of pick. The Camelot Kings fans will love the macro style of gameplay that this team is playing with. Able to find an opening, run on over to the Pyromancer, shrink up a bit of that gold lead, 400 or 500 or so. And way too early in the game for the Titans to answer with a Gold Fury, so sneaky objective to the Kings.
Yeah, you'd really expect the Tartarus Titans to be the ones setting pace around the Pyromancer itself, especially with layers finishing up Rage already in that second slot. Crit chance to the Tartarus Titans mean they just have a much easier time burning some of these objectives. But such a heavy commitment on the left side of the map does open the door for the Camelot Kings to look elsewhere. You've already seen the Dueling Dragons, Layers Sonic Boom, so there really wasn't many resources left for the Titans after that reset for themselves, and the Camelot Kings very adeptly play the map and remove an objective from the Tartarus Titans. Won't put them in the lead, but does remove the opportunity for the Titans to take it themselves, and rightfully so, because we're there. The Titans on next Pyromancer rotation, or even a Gold Free in the next coming minutes, could burn them pretty quick.
Let me ask you a question, Biff.
Please.
Do you think, how close to ban, in what scenario would you ban a Yu Huang right now?
I probably wouldn't.
All right, so this is actually gonna, maybe it's an egregious statement. Paul is getting like dangerously close to, I think, teams maybe needing to consider banning Yu Huang, and maybe in the second wave, something like that.
Second wave ban, not a big deal. First wave though, there's just so much priority
right,
picks.
So first wave, I don't know if you can do it ever. I might consider, and this game is far from over, but even through a few other matches and now 12 minutes of game 1 against the Kings here, Paul is just so good on this pick. We've seen some other players in the league pick it up and look good on it. Paul has ended effectively every game of Yu Huang top damage and like a gross amount of damage. I've seen a lot of 30, 40K damage games out of Paul. Already starts this game off at 2-0. So I don't think you're banning it in the first wave yet. But I think Paul is playing a brand of Smite on Yu Huang that teams might need to consider banning. This time, Sot will get stunned down by the World Weaver, and that'll be a kill over to Captain Twig and the Camelot King. Sot has been the recipient of all of these myth, and finally one pays off.
Well, he's got beads this time as he's able to make his way back to base, so it's going to be a little bit more difficult to finish him off in that scenario yet again. Maybe Big Man Ting starts to send those ultimates Aurora's way, or even potentially Layers' way. If you're going to remove beads, at least remove it from one of the carries, and Layers on Mercury really does need that CC immunity. So the Camelot Kings will likely try to adjust their playstyle from here on out, as SOT has ticked past that level 12 mark. I am loving the presence from the Camelot Kings, though. This constant aggression on the map. Captain Twig, every single time he's rotating over towards a lane, Big Man Tings falls up with that ultimate. Auto cancels from Nemesis, defense shred as well, and with the defense shred in his build, Stonecutting Sword in that second slot. The ultimates from Big Man Tings are already hitting pretty hard, and this is before we've even gotten to the point where you've picked the Neath for it. Once Mannequin's Hidden Blade starts ringing through, that's like 80% of someone's HP bar in the late game. This Camelot King's pick style composition has been working out very well.
Yeah, that's when my bias kicks in, when he gets the Hidden Blade going. Charges up the World Weaver. Twig doesn't have Retribution. Paul's going to get stunned here, but Paul does have beads, well timed, and there's safety for the Yu Huang. So Paul will take less than half of his HP and damage, just use the beads, and will survive. But an abduct from Genetics keeps things interesting in mid, and a root on the back end. Aurora desperately trying to move. Will be able to do so. No one drops, but ultimates exchanged.
Great rotation from Variety there. Paul's just using his leap, his self-banish, to get out of that ultimate from Neath every single day of the week. But a blink in from Variety finds that chain combo stun, does force out the beads from Paul. So a massive win over to the Camelot Kings to avoid that relic, not only from Paul, but Layers as well. So both carries now for the Tartarus Titans exposed for the next 2 minutes. And, well, Neath's ultimate's not on a 2-minute cooldown, so you got to think the King's in a position to try and find that pick. And looking at map state, we're about a minute out from the Pyromancer respawning. Could coincide with that ultimate cooldown, and the Camelot Kings could set themselves up for a very early secondary Pyro.
Big Man Ting's, I think, pretty smart with his build here, Myth. Always going to go Transcendence first on Neath. And getting the Fail not an item that you see all that often, but adding another 20% CDR on top of the 10% you get from fully stacked Transcendence. I think it's just, I mean, it's smart, it's simple, right? It's nothing super nuanced. But you get 30% CDR, and it lets you let those ultimates fly a little bit more often.
10% pen, some crit chance, some power. If it had attack speed on it, it would just be the best item in the game. Fail not synergizes very well with this style of build, so no surprise that they go for it in mid. Early ultimate, Cyclone's been in some trouble. Should be safe though.
And well, my man held onto those beads. Held onto those beads through it all. I am mashing the beads, but Cyclone's been smart enough and has enough wherewithal to know. No real threat underneath the tier 1 tower. Now Big Man Tings without ult, responding to Pyromancer that's going to get taken by the Camelot Kings. Despite maybe the Titans starting it up. Sot down to half HP, Aurora is as well, but a chase in, double stun out of Paul. There's some big damage from the Yu Huang, you need to turn it around. But now Paul being chased down, maybe a tier 1 tower dive, won't need it because Genetics has the abduct and the King's starting to roll. But Cyclone spin back from base.
Variety does such a good job zoning out the Tartarus Titans. SOT and Aurora distracted, can't help out with Paul. Paul has to contend with 3 on his own, and now it's the Camelot Kings keeping up their siege.
This is smart from the Kings, realizing you've got numbers and a health advantage, but no waves. And so no tier 1 down yet, but maybe enough health and enough numbers to go back for the Gold Fury. This is warded up by the Titans, so will be known. Paul is still dead for 15 seconds. I think that gives you a good glimpse at the power of the Gold Fury at this point in the game. Even without Paul, one of the most powerful members on the map. Camelot Kings not liking their chances around the Fury.
Yeah, even with 3 members, or there were 4 from the Tartarus Titans, but even with 3, I'm not sure you're feeling so confident as the Camelot Kings that you can look towards that objective, just because you have to be concerned about steal potential. Sure, you've got great pick potential because of this Neath in mid, but unless she's setting up backflip and Spirit Arrow, you really don't have the confirmation. And if Big Man Tings is using backflip out of combat to set up, you got to think Layers is going to blink in. You got to think SOT closes gap with that ultimate. So a very risky play had the Camelot Kings decided to stick to that gold. I like the idea of forcing it, just saying, hey, maybe the Tartarus Titans walk in, make a mistake, and we're just putting pressure on the map. But they don't, and the Kings respect that as well and back themselves back up to neutral. I am concerned, though. We're 17.5 minutes into this game. Layers is level 15. Finishes Deathbringer, has Rage.
No stacks.
Hasn't blinked just yet either. Yeah. That relic has gotten 0 usage.
Yeah. The Rage was bought, and I was expecting the pedal to be pressed, and it just has not yet. It has not been pressed down yet by the Tartarus Titans jungler. I said not twice, but then that made it a yes, so I had to say
the third
one more
okay.
not to flip it around.
Oh, there was an early blink, I'm told.
Yeah, but that was 18, that was
18 minutes ago.
18 minutes ago, Myth. Who can remember that? The point is, since First Blood, blink has not been used. And I think your point stands, Myth, just with a bit of an asterisk on it. Layers,
like everything I do.
Like everything you do, that's absolutely right. Tartarus Titans, now with all 5 members on the map, a chance to defend this Gold Fury being shredded down by the Camelot King. Cyclone Spin's going to be a bit late to this fight. Aurora blinks forward, drops the walls, Retribution is down on the Cabrakan. Where's the World Weaver lie at the end of this fight? Big Man Tings hasn't had the chance to use it yet. Up down though from Sot. It's a 3-man stun on the Eagles rally. And Layers will Sonic Boom through all of the Camelot Kings. Big Man Tings able to disengage, and it looks like the Titans will as well. So much tankiness, maybe not enough damage, and no one dies.
Big Man Tings barely makes it out with his life, and now it's the Camelot Kings on the reinitiation. Slight poking and prodding as Genetics steps forward,
nice
but the Tartarus Titans, now it's their turn to step up.
Good damage from Net. You need that poke damage from the Chiron now to give your team the big advantage. Variety has to back away. Tense moments around the Gold Fury. Lots of half health bars, but none reaching 0. And so the Gold Fury will stand on. Almost every ultimate gets used. Scarab's Blessing didn't need to get used. Variety can continue accosting the Tartarus Titans.
So tanky.
The rest of the Camelot Kings have back towards the Gold Fury, and it looks like we're going to do it again. This is where CDR can pay off for you, those next rounds of ultimates. And a rare Gold Fury, Dan Smith, in the first 20 minutes.
The Camelot Kings, the longer this fight goes, should have the advantage. Healing over for Big Man Tings with Unravel, Variety in combat healing for the entirety of his team, and the Kings have had multiple opportunities to reset, whereas the majority of the Tartarus Titans have stuck around. SOT now down to 50%. Cyclone Spin heading back to wave just to farm up. Big Man Ting's ultimate's out.
Netrioids is as well. Cyclone Spin ends up getting stunned. I think Sot took the World Weaver. Cyclone Spin stunned nonetheless. Genetics a bit too far forward. There's a Sonic Boom into the Khepri, out of the Scarab's Blessing, into a wall, and the Tartarus Titans pick up the support of the Camelot Kings. Now Paul, more freedom to walk forward in this fight. Oh, double knockback from the Yu Huang, and the Tartarus Titans, another three-man stun from Sot, and there's your burst damage delivered for free by Paul on the front line of this fight.
The Camelot Kings chase a little too far. They wanted Cyclone Spin between the towers. That is not an easy task. The Tartarus Titans take 3 for 0. And talk about perfect execution again. I've caught some flack for saying SOT is one of the most mechanical players. That is 2 back-to-back 3-man Eagle Rally set up immediately afterward, layers with 2 to 3-man Sonic Booms as well. The Tartarus Titans, when they choose to initiate, are just using all their ultimates so well. And the fight may have started around the Gold Fury. I haven't had a chance to say this in a while, but it was not for it. When fights go that clean, Fire Giant's got to be on your mind.
Yeah, and the Tartarus Titans now with a 5-second death timer on Big Man Tings, 15 on Variety, plus travel time to the Fire Giant pit. Link forward from Aurora, sets up burst damage from Paul. World Weaver out from Big Man Tings. That's going to hit Aurora. Takes a nice bit of damage. Fire Giant is low, and the Fire Giant confirmed by the Titans. But now Layers low on the other side of the FG pit. Takes some poke damage from Netrioid. But poke damage is all it is, and the Titans, as 5, grab fire.
But what will the Camelot Kings do with the time they've bought? 3 members of the Tartarus Titans essentially forced back to base. Tier 1 tower on the right as a consolation prize. Not the best feeling, maybe a little bit more if they so choose. Won't be the case. The Camelot Kings have to back up and find their defense. Pyromancer on the way out. And the Tartarus Titans' siege potential is pretty high. You've got Cyclone Spin with the space control, the range damage from Paul. That first ability's got a little bit more range than I think some of these mages are accustomed to, so decent poke. The main strength of the Camelot Kings in these longer team fights was that healing we were talking about earlier. Largely mitigated now by Fire Giant. That additional HP 5 it gives over should help out the Tartarus Titans on these longer fights. And still plenty of towers on the map to collect gold from. This is not a Fire Giant where you need to get a Phoenix. If you're taking out even 4 towers, I'd call it value. So expect the Tartarus Titans to slow play from here. The gold is not so far separated that they could just group up in siege. And even as you see this gold lead extend, realize that the fights that are erupting until the Tartarus Titans go back to base, it was only about a 500 gold difference. They are not playing with a lead.
This is where the Titans can build their lead, though. Big power spikes get hit on the back and repurchase. Paul grabbed himself a Soul Reaver. A few stacks now finally building up for Layers after the game quieted down from the Mercury in the mid-game portion. Kings are hanging out by this tier 2 tower. A stun from Cyclone Spin forces the cleanse from Netrioid to help out Variety. There's no split push here. This is just a 5v5 for the tier 2 tower on the left side of the map. Paul looking for some poke, sends his ultimate out. Connects onto Variety for good damage. Cyclone Spin, yes, takes the ultimate from Big Man Tings. But look at the health bar, does not go very low. And tier 1 and 2 down on left. Camelot Kings showed up, but not enough range, maybe not enough engage that they're comfortable with.
Yeah, the Titans just trying their best to displace anyone from the Kings. That ultimate from Paul only connecting with Variety, sure, sets up a good deal of damage on a Variety. But if it's all a single target, Genetics should be able to stop it out on his own. Titans take the tier 1 and 2 on the left-hand side. Will continue their siege now in mid. Tier 1, no opposition. I'm thinking this tier 2 is going to be a little different.
Tier 2 does look different. Oh my god! Cyclone Spin deleted by Netrioid and the rest of the Kings. Layers has to Sonic Boom away. Paul kiting backwards, but Paul left alone. And Paul does not have his float, so he will go down. And the Camelot Kings, they stand strong underneath their tier 2 tower. And Miff, they could be the first ones to grab a Phoenix here in this game if they want to keep going.
40 seconds on the nearest respawn. Layers hasn't made his way back to base just yet. Neither has SOT.
The tower is slow.
Yeah, the tower's not going so quick, but a minion wave's not so far away. I think the Camelot Kings have got really good odds here.
What a turnaround in this game. The Kings are the first ones to siege a Phoenix. Despite the Titans having Fire Giants on all 5 members, there's not much the Titans can do now in this game. They just have to watch this go down. They don't have the range to contest with the Phoenix, and mid lane Phoenix down. And the Camelot Kings on a tier 2 tower defense equalize the game and drop FG off too.
Man, Cyclone Spin just gets a little too active on that siege. I think it was a leap forward immediately, just dealt with by the Camelot Kings. Paul left alone as Layers was forced to Sonic Boom defensively. Means that when you're alone as a mage against 5, you're probably just going to fall down. Paul, despite being one of the best to have done it, not immune to those situations, does fall, putting himself at 2-2 and 3. And the Tartarus Titans, who had accrued themselves a lead, a 3-tower swing off that Fire Giant power play, immediately equalized yet again. And I think that could have been overconfidence. You fall into the trapping of, you look at the top of the screen, you're like, oh, we're 3,000-4,000 up. You're feeling pretty good about it. You didn't spend the gold just yet. Nah. You don't like hit people with your gold. It's the items you purchase. So the Tartarus Titans.
Imagine if you could.
Oh, Fafnir does it, kinda.
Just fill a bag with a bunch of gold coins and swing.
That would
around.
hurt. Gold's heavy.
Would you know?
Yeah.
I wouldn't. I got no idea. Yeah,
Never even seen gold.
All those rings on your hand. It's hard to open doors. The Fire Giant's back up in 30 seconds. Mid lane Phoenix far from the worst to go down. We'll be able to deal with it. Maybe not as simply as the right side going down if you're the Titans, but at least you can hang out closer to mid. Big Man Tings hitting some more power spikes, gets the Hidden Blade online, has Titan's Bane as well, and there's the Crusher, so we've seen some good damage from Big Man Tings, about halfway up the damage charts. Gonna need to see more now into those priority targets to give the Camelot Kings a better shot in some of these fights. Especially with all that CDR, just let him fly and see what happens.
A lot of damage is going to happen. I'd be surprised if he's not connecting with a backliner and doing upwards of 50%. SOT takes a whole lot of damage and is finished off by Netroid Tartarus.
Oh my god. Netroid has got it, and now the Camelot Kings with a one-man advantage for the next minute, and it's Sot who is down. And that is just another instance of one of the Titans stepping too far forward, not respecting the damage of the Camelot Kings, and the Kings got it in spades. Netroid with his second around the Fire Giant. Cyclone Spin desperately disengaging. Paul uses the beads right on time, and the Yu Wong should be safe enough, but Variety gallops forward, puts the lockdown and the hurt onto Paul. And in one fell swoop, Mifflin, the Camelot Kings may have just ended the game.
The Tartarus Titans just stepping too far forward. It's two distinct mistakes that cost them this match. Cyclone Spin on the tier 2 tower in mid, and SOT defending the Fire Giant. Best of luck, Layers. You've got so much to work through.
And he does not have Sonic Boom. Layers with no range just has to watch the Titan fall. And the Tartarus Titans, that is unbelievable. Think back. 5 minutes ago, the Titans have Fire Giant on all 5 members of their team. They're knocking down tier 2 towers, and then it's an overextension.
Literally two mistakes.
And 2 picks, and now your Phoenix is gone. And then one overextension by the Titans around the Fire Giant, and suddenly your Titan is gone. That is unbelievable. That is one of the fastest, most immediate turnarounds I've maybe ever seen in a game.
Yeah, I thought we lost those with 9-5 and the TTK changes, right? But very clearly, even these enhanced towers can't stop a team if they're finding as clean of fights as they have been. 5 members of the Camelot Kings with a defensive style are able to stop the Tartarus Titans. That's a tough one to internalize as well. What do you say? We made 2 mistakes and we lost. It's not the draft. It wasn't necessarily the play on field entirely, barring what, 3 combined seconds of decision making? That's a hard one for the Tartarus Titans.
But a competitive one for us to get excited about watching. Game number 2 between the Titans and the Kings coming up next.
Lorito, let's Hit me up one night, dime que me amas, we can switch it up now, right now, we can take it slow. Banging on the Despacito club, 안에서 처음 봐서 baby 혼자 있어, yeah. 시간 있어 여기 나가 술 좀 마시자, 밖에 놀달라면 먹자, 아직 집에 가지 마. You could tell me anything, 요즘 너만 생각해, broken 너무 뭔가 봐, 답이 계속 안 오네. Put a time 들어봐, you and I 늦었지만 better now than never, baby, alright. 밤늦게 on my mind 말해줘, do or die, 문제라면 baby, know I got the answers tonight, yeah.
Dime si te acuerdas cuando estaba aquí. Purple flowers, escuchando a Takiti. Ey. Siempre en mi mente cuando piense en ti. Hablándome en otro idioma, sí, baby. Ey. 사랑한다고 말해줘. 사랑한다고 말해줘. dímelo lento, baby, más lento. 사랑한다고 말해줘.
Hey, you got me singing. 두알라나 지금 들어가 너 집에 있잖아 yeah 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 좋아하니까 big crush you 알라 너도 좋아하잖아 yeah yeah
Estoy enamorado, siempre estás contigo. Purple flowers, baby, you know what I need. Tus flores, flores morado. Flores, flores morado, baby. Dime si te acuerdas cuando estaba aquí. Purple flowers, escuchando a Takiti. Ey. Siempre en mi mente cuando piense en ti. Hablándome en otro idioma, sí, baby. Ey. 사랑한다고 말해줘. 사랑한다고 말해줘. dímelo lento, baby, más lento. 사랑한다고 말해줘. 사랑한다고 말해줘. 사랑한다고 말해줘. dímelo lento, baby, más lento. 사랑한다고 말해줘. Yeah.
तुम तेरी तुम तुम तेरी कर से तुम तेरी तुम तेरी
number one of our first set goes over to the Camelot Kings in a back-and-forth bout between these two titans of teams within the tops of the league. And all of our players on these teams, all of our production, us over here, even on the desk, powered by our good friends over at Alienware. Make sure to go to smitegame.com/Alienware. Use code AWSmite09 to see all the great offers that Alienware has to you, the fans at home, and to see exactly what all of our players are going to be playing on here in the studio and at home for themselves. Thank you so much to Alienware for coming back in Season 9 of the SPL. Make sure to give them a follow at Alienware on Twitter and Instagram, and go to alienwarearena.com to see all the cool things that they have to offer to you guys. J-Mac and Trelly back here getting ready for game number 2. But game number 1, back and forth the entire time. No team really got a significant gold lead at any point. Just came down to one team fight gets an advantage over for the Titans, and then one bad team fight now puts it over for the Kings. And that kind of echoed back and forth throughout the entirety of that game up until the very end, where one overextension at the mid-Phoenix by the Tartarus Titans then puts the ball in the court for the Kings.
Yeah, it just seemed like, for me, the Titans had a little bit of control there going into that point, and then, as you mentioned, just a little bit of an overextension there. Maybe not expecting that much damage coming from Netroid on this Chiron. His snipes were on point all game.
He thought he had it.
I watched that, and I was like, it didn't look that egregious to me, but seeing it from his point of view shows that he was just so confident in his backing up. But yeah, you're going to see a lot of these Chiron highlights because his snipes were on point. The ability-based hunters, I was a little bit worried about their late-game DPS, but it turns out didn't need to be. They had plenty of it. These hunters were absolutely swinging the setup from BMT, and then just the finish from Netroid was consistent on this Centaurus.
Yeah, I mean, these snipes on the Centaurus are really starting to do a lot of damage. I mean, even some of us and maybe the players surprised by just how much Netroid was able to do. You see SOT go over the wall and you think, okay, he's quarter health, he should be fine. Nope, one single snipe takes out the Bologna and Netroid, and the rest of the Camelot Kings able to rally back together and take game number 1. And to maybe echo some of the maybe the sentiments that Dave had on the cast, which is talking about the Ji Wong. It's something that Paul has been very comfortable on throughout all the games that he's been able to play, something that Baronic has found comfort on. Do you feel that it maybe is getting to a point where Ji Wong might be a topic of conversation for some teams to ban? Obviously, winning against it at least puts it a little bit more favorable towards your odds of, okay, well, maybe we don't need to. But do you think he's starting to become, getting to this point where Ji Wong might be the topic of conversation for first-round bans?
Yeah, he's certainly able to do a ton of damage. I think once these players figure out, the placement of the ults, both of the dragons are able to immune that out and not let the push get so much value. There's a chance that there's no need for the Yu Hong to be that prioritized, but as of now, seeing how much Paul does on this character, I could certainly see that. Being banned away. One thing that I think is going to fall a little bit out of suit is the Mercury. I haven't been seeing so much value out of this Merc, even if the ults connect. The late game, just so easy to kill. I think the junglers that are able to go in and get out are finding a lot more value right now, whereas the Merc sort of has to go in, stay in, or die.
Yeah, the Mercury has been finding a lot of mixed success, to say the least, in these first couple of weeks back into the SPL. Picks and bans for game number 2 ready to go. The Camelot Kings once again on the first picks. The Titans have elected to take second pick for themselves. The Kings don't need to change up any of their draft necessarily. They can continue banning what they did in game number 1. They'll start it with the Robin, and they had an E-set up against Paul in that second ban slot. We'll see if the Kings hold that. Tartarus Titans will make sure that they continue to ban one of the biggest problems to really face, which against Genetics and his Umoja specifically.
Yeah, the Genetics is probably never going to get the Umoja. The Kepri was what he was able to play last time around. We'll see if there's any bans thrown that way, but still the Chernobog not giving this global presence over Netroid, probably a good option as well. And it looks like the Kings are just going to run back those bans. So the only adaptation will be right here, and it looks like there will be none. So I imagine the Kings just grab that Kepri once again, unless they're finding some newfound pressure in something else. They were fine with grabbing it last time, and it looks like they will. Just go ahead and run that one back, and I imagine the Titans saw that coming.
Yeah, I remember there was one play in the duo lane where it was a full collapse onto Genetics' Kepri, and he died and then revived himself and should have gone down immediately after that, but he had just enough mobility to be able to squeak past, and then somehow throughout all of that, Netroid was the one who ended up going down during that engagement. So I don't see any reason as to why the Kings would shy away from a pick that's so comfortable for Genetics, and a pick that's also comfortable for SOT. Bologna going to be locked in for the Tartarus Titans.
This is what we saw in game 1.
It is.
So let's see if we're going to see the Yu Huang, as Paul is looking. He's not looking very puzzled. He's not thinking, I don't think.
I will vanquish
Paul ever look puzzled, really?
From this world.
Okay, so this is also what we saw in game 1. And again, I think both of these teams found their success in game number 1, and that's something to highlight, is that it wasn't like the Titans got blown out of the water. It was a regrettable misplay into a dropped fire giant fight, and after that, the Kings were able to run away with it and end extremely quickly. So the Titans probably feeling, hey, if we don't drop that, we just win. No reason that we have to change our draft either. So now the question is, do the Kings call their bluff? And thus far, they have not. They have gone for the Chiron. And they have gone for the RDO, so now it's time for the Titans to make an adaptation after this pick. I thought that it was already ban o'clock. I'm just a little bit overzealous here. I was going to say they could look to ban that Neath, they could look to ban the Nemesis, but they're not going to take that Mercury. This time they're going to go with the Erlong Shen. I mean, I was just highlighting it. The Merc goes in, can't really get out. Erlong Shen, however, has some mobility, has some ways to commit to a fight and then back up. Is a lot more survivable than Mercury. You know, can't really get the benefit from the crit build and doesn't have that semi-global presence, but I think it's going to be a lot more useful for the Titans in this draft.
Well, forced adaptation now, so we'll have to see something new out of Captain Twig in the jungle as the Nemesis gets banned away and the Neath gets banned away. So the mid 2v2 from the Camelot Kings is going to have to make a complete change. Meanwhile, the Camelot Kings can keep the same 5 bans they had in game number 1 running true here, Xingqian and Kumbha Karn to add to the list. And the Tartarus Titans, the only change up they've made is their jungle swap up. No more of the Mercury. Instead, it's the Erlong Shen and Cabrakan one more time for Aurora.
Yeah, it's one thing to pick something because you're not like, you know, the Erlong Shen is different, but the Camelot Kings, their picks were banned away. They were forced into something different. That Neath and that Nemesis are not going to be making a return, so now they need a mid lane pick for BMT, or I suppose they could put that Chiron in mid, which, given how Nitroid played on it, I don't see any reason to change that up. His snipes were on point, so probably still going over the duo lane. Variety Solo's already locked out, so what kind of presence do they need? If they want more magical damage, you know, they already had a fair bit of shred built into the comp last time. They don't have that Nemesis anymore. So maybe a magical jungler. The Poseidon could be an option. The Vamana, however, is being hovered in the jungle, and the Poseidon, actually.
Yeah, the Vamana is something that Captain Twig himself has piloted a couple of times and has found success for his team on the Camelot Kings. Poseidon for Big Man Tings, who was banned away last time by the Tartarus Titans in that second phase. So now Big Man Tings has a chance to reprise that god and bring it back in this second game. Camelot Kings, though, taking a little bit of time before they want to lock this one in. And if this Vamana is the call, and it will be so, how does this change up the dynamic for the Camelot Kings team fighting? I mean, you go from having a Nemesis being able to shred through these tanks to now having a Vamana who's going to try and solely focus on the carries.
I think the draft is entirely different because, you know, there's no Neath and there's no 2 hunters because that Poseidon is being hovered in there. Well, so now they have this massive burst mage in Poseidon who can also build into the Bumba's Hammer, get a lot of movement speed online, and just zoom throughout the map, whereas Captain Twig has a lot of great targets here for Colossal Fury. The Yu Huang is going to have the mobility in Celestial Flight, but after that, could be in some trouble. Erlong Shen also is going to not want to take those boxing trades early on, maybe late game with some anti-heal built in. Won't be afraid to try and throw some autos the way of the Vamana, but I think early on Captain Twig is going to have a field day as long as he's able to pick his targets correctly and force out those leaps, things like that. Especially in solo lane, Cabrakan is going to have 0 peel for a Colossal Fury Vamana. There's not really much you can do except maybe like pop a shell and say good luck, hopefully you can run away, that sort of thing. And Cyclone Spin actually will run back to Hou Yi, so only real difference we're seeing here is that Mercury is gone and Erlong Shen is here.
And you touched on that earlier where it's a little bit more mobile, maybe a little bit tankier, at least for this Erlong Shen to get some of those initiations, a little bit more CC by way of that 9 turns blessing. But with this Vamana, with this Poseidon here, the Camelot Kings, that changes them up, as you talked about as well. No more double hunter available. Instead, you get that burst mage for the objectives. And so does that change the mindset then for the Kings, where last game they probably didn't want to try and fight around objectives because they didn't have that burn. Now they've got maybe a little bit less burn because they're missing out on that second hunter, but much more confirmation to the Kings now, maybe put a little bit more focus on their objective play.
Yeah, I could certainly see it. With the Kraken, you have this great tool where you can just have genetics in the front of the fight, wait for anyone to step up and try and be a frontliner on the opposition. The Titans, someone's going to have to be staying at the front line, whether that be a Roar, whether that be, you know, SOT on the Bellona. So someone getting abducted into a Kraken. It's always going to be an opportunity. You can usually blow someone up as long as the auto attacks from Netroid are also landing. You have a fair bit of damage there. So you have to play a different style. You can't just say, oh, they have a lot of like AoE range damage. Now they have just a burst damage at the Kraken that you do not want to be caught out in. So you got to be watching out for your placements. Have that Aegis on cooldown. Just have it on point because it's a completely different play style. But I think you're right to say that their objective confirm is simply better here. Not like the Yu Huang doesn't bring a lot of burst damage as well, but the Kraken is just so much easier and instant.
And something that we saw very early on in the game, again, was these level 2 Yu Huang First Bloods.
Oh, yeah.
At this point, it's not even like a joke. It's just something that has been happening time and time again on this god. So we know that pressure can be established in that mid lane if it is played around this. But is that the only place that Layers puts his focus? Does he just get that first blood in the mid lane and then call it good from there, or where does Layers then need to maybe establish that presence? Does he keep it in mid, or does he move to one of these other side lanes?
I mean, I'm sure if he could get a guaranteed first blood in mid lane, he will. And if Paul's on point with the Yu Huang, which he has been time and time again, it would be a great option. You just have a lot of easy CC onto this Poseidon with the pin and the root as well from Yu Huang. So, you know, BMT has to position himself pretty far back in that lane. You've got the Whirlpool for the Mink, but it's not going to be something you want to hold on to just for defense. You want to clear the wave with that. So I imagine Layers does get a little bit of pressure in the mid lane, but solo's always an option.
Well, we'll see if the Titans can keep that pressure up from game number 1 and bring it back into game number 2, or are the Camelot Kings going to run away and stay undefeated? Let's jump right into the second game.
How about a mental check now for the Tartarus Titans in control of game 1 prior to a couple of oversteps.
Oh.
What in the world is this? We don't get this ever.
He's all right. He's all right.
Oh, unlucky. I was hoping. No, that's biased. I can't say
You
that.
chill with the hope, all right?
Oh no, because I was gonna say to be fair.
To be fair.
To be fair.
3 people get that reference.
And you know what? The 3 people out there
They're
who
loving
get it. I love you and appreciate you. Camelot Kings and the Titans will head on to game number 2 here, Miff. And a lot of the core of the damage from the Kings still remains from game number 1, Netrioid. And some of the initiation genetics and variety is there as well. But 2 big pivots, the biggest of which might be the smallest character, and that's Captain Twig playing the Vamana jungle.
That's a good transition. Captain Twig on Vamana.
You ruined it.
Yeah, that's on me. I wasn't ready for something as good as that. Look, Vamana has got an interesting power trajectory, I suppose, in that he is a little bit more mid-game slanted than something like an Erlong Shen. Like these bruiser frontline auto-attack junglers, things like the Erlong Shen, really want to get involved at like level 1. Osiris as well in that conversation. But I would argue Vamana is more so slanted towards level 5. He's a lot more dependent on his level 5 and has deceptive burst damage. And it's burst instant CC at that. A blink into a knockup from Captain Twig just buys so much time for follow-up. But because you have to use your dash as your initiation, you really want to have Colossal Fury available. So yep. I'm not expecting so much from Captain Twig until around level 5, whereas Layers, on the other hand, on this Erlong, I want to see him like active now.
Yep. Fun fact, Miff. The last Penta I got was on Vamana.
That is a fun fact.
That is a fun fact, isn't it? Many moons ago.
I don't even remember my last Penta.
Have you gotten one?
Yeah, I've got in the 10 years I've been playing. Yeah, I got one.
I don't know. Some people have probably gone a long time without.
If anyone's gone a decade without a Penta, I'm sorry.
Honestly, they should be as well.
Okay.
They should also be sorry. Tartarus is the one guy out there, the one player out there.
He's also the guy who got our reference.
Who got the Letterkenny reference. We'll stick with the solo lane matchup though, Miff. And look again, there's so much great out of game 1 for the Titans. And a lot of it's returning here for game 2. I think, you know, we talk about whether or not you change your strategy, things like that. You know, you lose a game, how much do you need to change? I think the Titans have to actually feel confident in the way that the vast majority of game 1 was going, except for a couple instances of overstepping and overextending that really cost them. I think the Yu Huang was on pace to do serious damage numbers, top of the game at the end, even in a loss. SOT was feeling it on this Bologna. So you change up some stuff here and there for Layers, of course, but I think the core of this roster being the same is not all that surprising.
And as far as like actual play on field, Mercury might be more late game slanted. The execution itself, pretty similar. Blue buff invade seems to have gone well, but can they make it out alive? Difference in decision making. SOT digs in his heels. Layers says, I'm probably done here.
Layers trying to head out is slowed. Sidestepping some damage. The health discrepancy is massive. And now it's infinite as Variety has knocked down Layers for first blood. And SOT is going to have to watch the Camelot Kings walk into his blue buff. Best Sot can do here is confirm his own blue, prevent things from being equalized, but unable. So blue buff's traded, but first blood to the Kings.
Early start for the Camelot Kings, and first blood over to an Artio means a god that already has slim windows where you can rotate through and actually kill her. Those windows have been closed up a little bit more, so rotation back in from Captain Twig. Can SOT make his way out?
Oh no, it's gonna happen again. Twig stuck around on right. And now another kill for the Camelot Kings. Small advantages right early on. Now it's about pushing those advantages. But Captain Twig on this Vamana, feeling it a bit early here. 1 kill and an assist for both Variety and Twig.
Already ticks over to level 5, so the hard part of Vamana jungle now completed. Colossal Fury
That
available.
was the hard part?
That's the hard part, just getting through that early portion. Because if you look at these guys, not only is it Captain Twig playing Vamana, who's got a more so mid to late game slant, but Layers goes Mannequin Scepter in first slot, so you're really favoring Erlong Shen in that fight because of how aim strike works, or the first ability from Layers, give you lifesteal, boxing matches favor you. So you're really expecting Captain Twig to not be able to get as active, but because of the blue buff invade and the timing of it from the Tartarus Titans, Layers forced to disengage, can't even leverage his mannequins. Twig has alleviated a lot of that pressure and already finished up his Golden Blade. So the hard part's over. Now he's got Colossal Fury. It's going to be so hard to kill him.
Well, Myth, maybe it's smart, because think about what happened in game 1, where at level 2, Paul and Layers found first blood in mid, and you know that's potentially going to happen against a Poseidon early on and a Vamana jungle if you don't like the early game. So if you're going to try to put pressure elsewhere, maybe keep it away from mid and just tell Tings to farm up as safely as he can, and Tings has been able to do it. A 1-level lead over Paul, as a matter of fact. So the Camelot Kings just shy of 1,000 gold in the lead in the first 5 minutes. I do wonder what the Vamana jungle build path is going to look like. I know there's only so much speculating that can be done, but
I'm thinking it's going to be pretty similar to Layers.
I think auto attack centric.
Yeah, I'm thinking they're pretty similar.
Do you favor one or the other as the game goes on? I mean, you got mannequins for Layers.
In the absolute late game, you're going to favor Layers. We've hit an inflection point where Vamana should find more value now, as he's got much easier execution on his ganks. But in the hyper late game, Twig's going to get to a point where Colossal Fury is not enough healing to keep you alive in the front line, and you're not going for a super tanky build on Vamana out of the jungle. So it'll become Layers, who doesn't deal as much damage as he does now, can still be that primary initiator for his team. A Blink 9 turns Blessing can find massive value in a team fight. But we're talking about the hyper late game right now. It's a good ways off until that point. For now, Captain Twig, incredibly strong and incredibly capable of getting involved on the map.
Do you have more or less respect for me, knowing that when I got my Penton Vamana, it was Animosity, Hasten Katana, Wind Demon, Deathbringer.
Wow, how many patches ago is this?
It was a while ago.
Yeah.
Like I said, my last Penta, it's been a minute. So more or less respect, given that build path.
Vamana's way cooler in the jungle, first off, and that's not a jungle build you're talking about. Secondly...
No, that was an assault build.
Yeah. Man, don't talk to me about a pentakill and assault, bro. Why am I even engaging my brain with that?
I had to bait you in, I had to get you talking and then drop the
That's
bomb.
crazy.
That was assault.
We're on air. People know now.
Yeah, I got a Vamana, Penta, and assault, everyone.
Right, weird flex.
Okay. Camelot Kings pull themselves a bit in the lead here, but things have slowed down. 1.3K. Actually, it's grown up just a little bit. It was around 800 just a few moments ago. Again, as the crashing of the waves change, that'll be a few hundred gold. Tartarus Titans find an opening on a Netrioid, or did they? You need some damage, and Netrioid will... Oh, he procced it on the Gold Fury. What a big brain play from Netrioid, and the Tartarus Titans watch the Scarab's Blessing get procced and fly by the wayside.
Aurora very nearly buys enough time with those Tremors. Netrioid was trying to get to that Gold Fury the whole time to tank it out, but those Tremors so good at slowing them down, and now Aurora in some trouble.
Oh no, the turning of the tides. Aurora is going to live, but not for much longer. Big man Tings deals the final blow, but Captain Twig was at the forefront of the engagement. And the Camelot Kings not only stay alive, Netrioid, but the Tartarus Titans end up dropping a player as well. The Camelot Kings feeling themselves early in game 2.
The timing of it, the Kings can steal away some of these camps, continue to slow down Layers and Paul's farm. Just a really tough start off a fight that you would expect to go well, but it's this Khepri again that just makes it so hard for the Tartarus Titans to hit Pater early on. All your damage for the most part, single target. Paul, generally single target. Layers, 100% single target. Cyclone Spin, outside of the ultimate single target as well. Genetics on this Khepri, it's not hard to choose who you're going to ult. It's the only guy taking damage.
Right, the one dude who's about to die. And it's worked for the Camelot Kings in the one instance where we've seen Genetics have to use it. And these are the styles of games, far from over, but these are the styles of games where the Camelot Kings tend to really exert their pressure. So good at knowing the macro and the state of the map and playing around that, buff spawns, objective spawns, things like that, from even or even behind. Now they're ahead, and so the Kings should be feeling comfortable with where they're at in this game. Titans still have some opportunities, but have just not seen much pressure outside of the one attempted fight onto Netrioid. Granted, the Kings have slowed down since their first couple of kills. Decent time for a build check-in as big man Tings has gone do more, but then something else, maybe a Charon's coin after that. And that's what you'll need. You'll need that big burst damage from the Kraken to hopefully keep up with Paul, because we know what this Yu Huang is going to be able to do. A little bit of poke damage is the answer right now. Genetics is low, Kraken up, but it's more of a separator. Genetics will get out thanks to the Scarab's Blessing, and in fact, he'll do you one better. It's an abduct onto Cyclone Spin. Paul being run down by Captain Twig. Agas, no good. And Captain Twig has simply walked at the back line. The Kings have found another. Aurora in the whirlpool. See you later. Tartarus Titans lose 2 more.
The Tartarus Titans just get so split up there. The full engage onto Genetics, and even Genetics making the misplay of using Scarab's Blessing at like 60% HP doesn't matter, because Paul sets up into the Dueling Dragons just for the CC immunity. Aurora had already dedicated the ultimate. Cyclone Spin just tries to create some separation in the fight. And because those core 3, Paul, or Layers, Aurora, and Cyclone Spin, are trying so hard to finish off that kill onto Genetics, buys time for Captain Twig to very simply go into the back line, stare down Paul, and finish him off completely on his own, not only taking away the ultimate, but the Aegis as well. So you got to think, now big man Tings has got some solo kill potential. All he has to worry about is the float from Paul. Outside of that, Kraken's going to connect for the most part. The Camelot Kings have upped their pace, man. This is a dominant performance. 5-0, 10 minutes in, and I don't think they're going to slow down anytime soon. Objectives already being played through. Pyromancer taken out. Gold Fury shouldn't be too far behind it.
I appreciate that we've stuck with float for the Yu Huang.
It's good. I think it's simple.
I know there was a bit of pushback, but
from the upper brass.
Are you the upper brass?
That's right.
I appreciate you coming around on it, though. I mean, it's literally is what he's doing. I don't need to explain it, because
it's self-explanatory.
What's on your screen, right? And so the question always is, in moments like this, Myth, I mean, I guess you already explained for Layers, like late into the game, the Erlang Shen will eventually come back around. Paul going stacking, Warlock Staff does have the Soul Gem though, so you'll have some burst there. Is the game plan now for the Titans to just try to stabilize, slow this game down, and hope that you can get another 20 minutes, 30 minutes down the road?
Getting to that point, although idyllic for the Tartarus Titans, I think probably a little bit unrealistic considering how early in the game we're already having this conversation. So the Camelot Kings have got plenty of opportunity if the Tartarus Titans are going to take a more pacifistic style of play from here to just push their lead. This is one way to do so, at least force an engagement. The Tartarus Titans do realize Gold Fury is being looked at, but they will also know that it has not actually been pulled, so will not be forced to show any presence here. The Camelot Kings showing that they're capable of putting damage towards it. Might be able to rotate back through once the Oracle Vision wears off, put that pressure on yet again, force the Tartarus Titans to face check it.
Yep.
Or just do it now.
The Kings move themselves over to the Gold Fury.
Fast.
It's going down quickly, and there's going to be a Kraken on the other end of this. Gets used. Camelot Kings get the Gold Fury. Gold lead extends, and the Titans just have to watch it go down. Over 4,000 gold. In the lead are the Camelot Kings. Methodical from the Kings now in this game. Felt that way some moments in game 1. The Titans just a really good call to pull that early Fire Giant, and that's what gave the pressure over, but Kings bought their time in the first game, and now in the second game, bought just a few kills, and that's resulted in a nice little gold lead here. Big man Tings does indeed finish off the Charon's coin, so you're going to get some nice burst damage out of the Kraken moving forward. And then you call it, Myth, and do a very similar build Captain Twig is to Lair, Stone Cutting Sword after the Golden Blade, shredding down some of those targets. Shotguns for Sot should be able to help, though, in some of these team fights around Layers and Cyclone Spin, but it's about getting to that phase, giving your team a chance to fight.
Going to be a while until Sot's able to rotate out. I think it's probably around this next Pyromancer. We'll see these Soul Laners get involved, unless we see the Camelot Kings, and just the Camelot Kings get active at mid, make a ploy to take out that Tier 1 tower. Outside of that, the game should slow down for the next couple of moments while we wait for a POI to spawn up. So it's all about farming efficiently, splitting your farm well, controlling the macro, greater scorpions, the mid camps. That's really where the Tartarus Titans are going to put in their work and close up this gap for now. 4,000 deficit 13 minutes in means you're probably just not looking for a team fight.
Maybe looking for a pick, or at least a set of beads off of Paul. Ultimate
good
gets
ult.
used, but Big Man Tings will use the beads. Takes the damage, but not a lot of the CC. Captain Twig is going to have to use his ultimate as well. Metroid lets Tartarus fly. That's a teleport in and a blink forward from Variety, but Cyclone Spin has both beads and Aegis, so the Hou-Yi should be fine. Metroid gallops forward, sends Cyclone Spin on the retreat. That said, Miff, I mean, your point is absolutely correct. Neutral objectives farm, things like that, but doing it against the Kings, it's one of the harder teams in the league to out-macro.
I love that play we just saw in the duo lane. Netroid goes in the Centaurus, gets the slow out, and Variety just TPs in and says, I'll close gap. I'll dash, blink forward, connect the root, try and put some pressure on a Cyclone Spin, but Cyclone, ever the veteran, knows when he can hold on to his relics, does get to make his way out of there with both, but a lot of players probably aren't in that same situation. That is a very cool executed plan. Got to be something they've practiced in the past, because who's thinking like that? I'll just send Tartarus and slow him. Just get in here, teleport at the tower, and we'll run him down.
Oh no, Assad tried to get that. He is lucky that Captain Twig does not have ultimate right now, or else Assad would be in some serious trouble. 9 turns blessing out on a Twig, but not a lot of damage. Twig pops the Thorns, haven't seen a lot of that recently. Eagles rally needed. Assad will save his own life. The Kraken for Big Man Tings would have sealed the deal. So small bits of scrapping over on right, and unfortunately for the Titans, not able to get the nice gold infusion from the tier 1 just yet over on the right side of the map. So decent cooldown on the Colossal Fury, and that's of course worth noting. It's been a minute since we've been able to see Captain Twig use it. So forcing those types of ultimates out in the future, a nice win condition as far as team fights go for the Titans.
Could be. Camelot Kings showing a little bit of presence around the Pyro, but Big Man Tings using the Kraken just moments before in the right lane. Probably doesn't bode well for their ability to confirm the objective itself. The Tartarus Titans, though, they know that Kraken's down. This could be one way back in. Still long odds, though. It's a pretty massive gold deficit, and even just DPS checking on the Pyro, realizing they don't have the ability to burn it out quickly. So the Camelot Kings likely will just bide their time until Big Man Tings has that ultimate. Maybe try and put out some pressure, then rotate back towards the Pyromancer. I wouldn't be surprised if it's immediately off this reset either. The DPS potential so incredibly high, and fighting around that right side of the map should favor the Camelot Kings as well. Variety been getting the better end of this 1v1 with SOT. In-combat healing when Variety's involved in the team fight means that any fight that happens to the right side should favor them as well. Keep your eyes on the Kings. They're the proactive component for now. It's just about where they're going to put that pressure.
Big Man Tings is going to be absolutely zooming around this map. 2 more VS. Now completes Toxic Blade. This is not the first time we've seen this build. We've seen this style of build a couple of times on Poseidon. Very difficult to lock down targets, or lock down the Poseidon, this style of build. Easy Pyromancer to the Camelot Kings. Fury in 25 seconds. As always, great macro game from the Camelot Kings, not giving the Titans the opportunity to split the objectives on the map. You're going to save your Kraken for the big one, the Fury. And these are the style, again, think back 5-10 minutes ago when I'm talking about the Kings and a slight lead and how good they are at playing even from even, or as far as macro game goes. Now they're ahead without getting any additional kills, and just continued to exponentially increase the lead to the point where I'm not sure the Titans feel super comfortable rotating over to this Primal Fury. And again, that's going to add some golden experience into the back pocket, and then a Fire Giant eventually gets looked at. Tough decision making over the next couple of minutes for the Titans. What do you feel comfortable stepping up for?
I think the decision's essentially been made for them. Hey, we've been playing pretty passively, and it's getting a lot worse pretty quickly. It's time to get active. It's time to put up a defense, and unfortunately now the defense is going to be hard fought, nearly 6,000 gold down, but the Tartarus Titans cannot afford to let this Gold Fury go without some sort of fight back. Going to get a lot more difficult before it gets easier if you're just waiting on the timer. So good to see the Tartarus Titans showing some presence here. They've got decent steal potential. Paul can send out the Dragon from a range.
Paul hurts.
Even Cyclone Spin to a certain extent, that ultimate to create some space around the objective. It's a good lead for the Kings, but it's not a guaranteed fight. And the Tartarus Titans, just in showing presence around the gold, have dissuaded the Kings from pulling it themselves. So it's a return back to neutral, which double-edged, right? Every time it's done this, every time we've gone back to just farming the map, the Camelot Kings push themselves ahead, but the longer the game goes, the closer the Tartarus Titans get to their power spikes as well. This is probably best case scenario. As long as an objective isn't being pulled, then the Camelot Kings can't force a fight.
Maybe get a pick onto Netrioid. Tartarus gets used, and that is a pick. The first kill of the game in over 18 minutes goes to the Tartarus Titans, and it's Cyclone Spin who picks it up, and Netrioid the one who ends up dropping. It's a pretty simple fight there. Does buy some time, buy some breathing room on left.
Look at the itemization from layers. I was surprised to see any sort of separation, but it makes sense. Toxic Blade in that third slot to deal with the 1v1 against Captain Twig, removing some of that healing from Colossal Fury.
This is smart.
Yeah, the Titans actually in a position to take the Primal Fury themselves. This is great for them. Finally, something on the map going their way, closing up that gap and making it easier to find defense around subsequent objectives. That's a pretty nice cut into the gold lead the Camelot Kings have established for themselves.
Yep. Few hundred gold back down as it was over 5,000. And that's what you wanted. You wanted to see the Titans get proactive. You know, send a couple towards Netrioid. Now use that one-man advantage, especially on the left side of the map, for the big objective that's on the left side of the map. It's now these next couple of moments where we're back into a 5v5. The only big neutral objective on the map is the Fire Giant, where the Titans can't afford to fall further behind yet again just because of neutral farm. Toxic Blades abound here. I've already mentioned Big Man Tings with his. You mentioned Layers with one. Captain Twig now finishes up one as well. It's the auto attack Smith. No one's going to be doing a lot of healing if one of those three is weaving some autos in there. 30% attack speed. The penetration's nice. The move speed feels really good on the Vamana and, of course, on the Poseidon as well.
So it's all about movement speed to get you farm for right now. It's playing the map incredibly well, or maybe it's about looking for a pick. Heavy grouping from the Camelot Kings on the right-hand side. And SOT, he just wants a blue.
Yeah, remember, a pick is what turned into a Primal Fury last time. A pick would turn into a Fire Giant this time. Titans have 3 in mid.
So
Cyclone Spin is alone on left. The Camelot Kings know Cyclone Spin is over there on left. Cyclone Spin in moments like this in the past has just stuck with it and split push. This might be the Titans just accepting that outside of a steal, they don't have much of a fight to be had around the Fire Giant, but the Camelot Kings unhappy with that. Nice separation from Aurora, drops the walls, and a double stun on the front line. The Kraken is big from Big Man Tings. Forces jumps out from the Titans, and it's Aurora now, the only option for the Camelot Kings. And they will come up empty-handed. Best case scenario now for the Tartarus Titans. That Cyclone Spin has been left to farm up the left side of the map. Won't be able to get the Phoenix, but does drop a tier 2.
Yeah, the Camelot Kings were just not willing to leave it up to that coin toss, so the Tartarus Titans are able to get them off the Fire Giant and net themselves a couple of towers on the left-hand side. And now even establish the defensive positioning themselves, get that ward advantage with Pyromancer spawning up. The Titans in a much, much better position. 3,000 gold, 22 minutes in. That's not so large. The Camelot Kings have slipped on their control, and now the Tartarus Titans in a position to start fighting back in actually proactively. You don't even necessarily need to find the pick first. It's all about positioning on the map and figuring out where you can put that aggression. Cyclone Spin's done with duo, so he should be in this next team fight, and because he spends so much of that time farming, actually has a lead on Netrioid. This Ho-Yi is going to be swinging pretty hard.
Cyclone Spin loves that style of play. I've seen that so many times from the
Usually it's Chernobog, though.
Right, you're right. Chernobog, someone else that you can rotate into the fight with, but Cyclone Spin may be one of the most prominent in the league as far as saying, you guys try to just survive in a 4v5, delay the Fire Giant if you can. I'm going to push down as much of this left side of the map as I can. And it works out well for the Titans this time. Pyromancer at least drops for the Kings, so they're able to stabilize that just a bit. And resetting and heading to the Fire Giant will happen just a bit quicker. Haven't seen much Trebuchet presence this game. A little bit throwing some rocks here and there, but nothing that has totally changed the pressure of the waves. As a few of the, what are they, chalices, I guess, get collected. Offerings, right, get sent over to the obelisks. Titans around the Fire Giant. Likely just checking the reaction time of the Kings, but this is burning relatively quickly. Captain Twig stunned, not pulled back by the ultimate from Paul. And the sustain up will help, but again, that is a massive ult cooldown. We talked about this 10 minutes ago. That is a long cooldown that Twig is not going to have. Titans might be able to force something off of it.
And even if Twig had that cooldown in the fight, we've gotten to the point now where really Colossal Fury is not going to turn around the engagement. You need it to stick to your target, but it doesn't win you the fight.
Variety stuns too, but Variety will take the Scarab's Blessing, and it gets procced by Aurora. And again, the Titans just happy at this point, kind of picking one ult here and there, but trade out a couple of their own as well. Paul's still back and respawning from the Twig fight. Aurora and Layers use theirs this time onto Variety. And so ultimates suddenly become the big economy number going into the Fire Giant dance. We're trading back and forth. Twig halfway to having his back, but now Layers and Aurora waiting for theirs. Who can capitalize?
Well, Paul's got a good deal of cooldown, and his is not only burst, but also team fight initiation, so it could be that he does so. Metroid, though, poor beads.
He's sensing a stun from Aurora, but Aurora was not sensing the Kraken. That's the big ultimate the Kings needed to hit. Layers being run down by Variety in a 1v1. SOT running for the hills as well, but Big Man Tings just too speedy, and the Poseidon snags a double. Layers will not survive either, and the Camelot Kings again capitalize on an overextension, and suddenly everyone but Cyclone Spin is going to die.
Paul falls down, and Cyclone Spin does what Cyclone Spin does. Split push on the map, and just one mistake, one overstep from the Tartarus Titans around these Fire Giant fights, and the Camelot Kings just seeing the chink in the armor, rip the armor off from there. Fire Giant going to go over them cleanly on all 5 members, and if Variety locks eyes with Cyclone Spin here, might be able to stop his back, buy some time for these incredibly speedy members of the Camelot Kings to rotate their way over. That's what I would have said, but already Big Man Tings on the right-hand side. It's all about the towers. 30 seconds on Paul's respawn. The Camelot Kings power play ain't over yet.
It is not often you see KDAs like the Titans have right now in a Titans game. You know, 0-2 for everyone.
Not on them.
Not on them, right. Yeah, we're used to seeing them do that potentially to other teams. 0-2 for the top 3 members, 0-3 for Aurora. Cyclone Spin only able to get involved in the 1 kill the Titans have.
100% participation.
And it was a simple 2v1 on Netroid, nothing that really involved team fighting. This is a very, very strong game from the Kings, and at moments, some weak play from the Titans have really given control to the Camelot Kings. And Myth, we haven't really seen a Phoenix Siege or a Phoenix defense, despite the number of Fire Giants that have gone down in this set. The Gold Fury now respawns. Camelot Kings, right on time, will pick that up. And only a couple Tier 2 towers left on the map.
And the point we had made around the Fire Giant Siege in Game 1 was that the gold was equalized when it had started up. Not the case this time. No. The gold lead is not fake. They had that before they got to the Gold Fury, so the majority of it already spent up, means that the itemization going to pretty heavily favor the Camelot Kings. Fire Giant, obviously very important. Decent anti-heal option for the Tartarus Titans, so we'll be able to contend with Variety at Captain Twig's healing, as well as, I suppose, some of the passive healing from Chiron and the Fire Giant. So not completely advantaged, but the siege potential is pretty high. Big Man Tings shredding towers, as is Netroid, and the Tartarus Titans, and Paul in particular, outside of that ultimate, gonna struggle to find opportunities to stop this push.
Variety simply walks forward. Centaurus out from Cyclone Spin, or from Netroid rather, and look at the health bars melt on the backline as Netroid has done mountains of damage at the start of this fight. Captain Twig looking for the backline, and he's found it. Now the rest of the Camelot Kings can walk forward. Scarab's Blessing will save Twig's life. Ricochet from Cyclone Spin is fantastic, but doesn't grab a kill. Camelot Kings with 2 plus Phoenix, and they'll head out.
Just grab the Phoenix, start to head over towards mid. 40 seconds on the nearest respawn. And the Camelot Kings may not have their ultimates, but relics are still good. 2 shells available, your beads are still up. You're going to be healing with these Bumpa's hammers as well.
Netroid went into that fight with 8,000 damage.
What's he at now?
14,500.
Oh
he did nearly 6,500 damage in one team fight from Centaurus, and then detonating the marks that he had. We have officially reached the point in the game where anyone left alive is going to get shredded down by the Camelot Kings. Needs to be a miracle play here. Cyclone Spin jumps in. Cyclone Spin doesn't get it. And the Camelot Kings capitalize on an overextension around the Fire Giant again. And now the Tartarus Titans base is left wide open.
Respawns though, Layers already back up. Paul, Aurora, SOT all at full strength. You might only have 1 bird left, but you should be able to maintain it. I agree with the call from Cyclone Spin there. That's really the only thing, and even in a TKO, the only thing that could have stopped this siege from the Camelot Kings. Captain Twig at 1/100th HP, forced to head back to base. That's a high value trade for Cyclone Spin. Unfortunately, just not quite able to finish off his kill. And the Camelot Kings methodically stripping the entirety of the map. That gold lead was 10,000 going into the siege. and has extended itself magnificently by another 6,000. Just in time to regroup, get ready for this Fire Giant.
Man.
I don't think the Tartarus Titans take the fight in neutral territory, as tough as that is to say. And this Fire Giant will likely be enhanced when the Camelot Kings take it for themselves. But neutral territory fights just haven't been working for them. No fights have been working for them. It's 12-1. But Titan room still healthy? Maybe fight there.
I have not seen the Titans outclassed like this in a while. And that's...
Maybe ever.
Maybe ever. Except for maybe Season 8 Smite World Championship Grand Finals.
Grand Finals. That was, yeah, okay. But besides that.
Right, besides that. Right. No, it's not something you see often.
Hold on.
Captain Twig.
If Aurora can wall him.
Will not get jumped on yet. He's going to walk around the corner.
They gotta get him. They have to.
But Captain Twig and the Colossal Fury gallops away. And for like the 20th time this game, Scarab's Blessing saves someone's life. Netroid melting damage. Yet again, another 4,000 rolls through.
Yep.
Double Kraken in the mid lane. Big Man Tings running down Aurora. Netroid into Centaurus. Finds damage onto SOT. And this is the fight the Kings weren't looking for, but the fight they are happy to take. Variety dealing with the backline all on his own. It has been a lopsided affair. And one more kill this game drops for the Tartarus Titans. 4 against 3 on the siege.
Big Man Tings is real fast. A good route from Paul. Will buy some time for his team, but is it enough? Cyclone Spin just standing his ground.
Cyclone Spin will die where he stands. The Camelot Kings have simply outclassed the Titans today. Game 1, a bit more back and forth. Game 2, all Kings all day, and it will end all Kings all day. 2-0 to the Camelot Kings. That team's feeling themselves.
Man, it was just play on field in Game 2, right? Game 1, all one mistake. Game 2, it was one major mistake that really opens the door for the game, that play around the Fire Giant where a couple of Titans get picked out. But in Game 2, it was also like a 6,000, 7,000 gold lead by the time we had gotten to that one mistake from the Tartarus Titans. Just a great day for the Camelot Kings and outpacing the Titans.
I did not expect a 2-0 in this set.
Nope.
I didn't expect two,
I tried to bet you.
20-something minute game. This one was like just at 30 minutes. Camelot Kings absolutely roll today. 2-0 over the Tartarus Titans. Miff and I don't have much more to say about it, so we'll send it over to the desk to break it down.
Thank you so much. I think maybe the word outclass in that game specifically is probably a good way to highlight that one, Charlie. I mean, talking in the pregame interview with Genetics, one of the things that he talked about was the Titans' ability to outdraft many of their opponents, to be able to, before they even get to the battleground, usually have a winning game plan. But when it came to the actual battleground, especially here in game number 2, the Camelot Kings showed up in spades.
Yeah, I think the Camelot Kings, they woke up on the right side of the bed. They had a good breakfast, and then they came here ready to play. I gotta highlight Genetics. Those ults were on point throughout. You don't get a game like that where there's only 2 kills total for your squad. The Titans, that is. The Camelot Kings got much more. Without a very stellar performance from the Khepri, so any kill that the Tartarus Titans thought they could get was immediately taken away. Netroid was on point with the Chiron snipes in both games, getting my fantasy team a lot of points, so shouts out to you. And, you know, Twig on this, the whole team, it's the stat lines throughout. BMT had so many kills as well, just chasing down, zooming on the Poseidon. It's hard not to highlight them all because they all looked great.
Yeah, everybody on the Camelot Kings really rallying together in game number 2 to be able to find themselves not just a win over the Tartarus Titans, but a 2-0 in pretty convincing fashion for the second game, a close game number 1, and to say the very least between them. And even on that play there, that play started with a pluck onto a roar. Netroid accidentally hitting his beads when he didn't mean to. I imagine probably trying to hit ability instead. But Big Man Tings going relatively untouched throughout the entirety of this engagement. It really wasn't until the chase extends all the way to the far left side of the map that Big Man Tings is really under any kind of threat. I mean, the fact that this guy, again, I have to re-emphasize, he's playing from the UK right now, so Big Man Tings is playing on ping compared to the other players and is still able to put a performance out like this.
And he keeps warning them he's going to strike them with his noodle, and they don't care. They just all keep dying because he had so many resets with the Bumbas, the Staff of Mirrodin. That's just what it brings, and again, Netroid on the snipes. This one was funny, where just like Captain Twig was diving on SOT so hard that Genex was like, yeah, I'll just give you the ult. Go ahead, dive the well if you need to. You've got you're Vamana, you do enough damage. I'll res you if you need. And it was just, nowhere was safe, even in the base. The Tartarus Titans, unfortunately for them, were just not able to find any real winning strategy here. I think they made some adjustments in the comp from game 1 to game 2, but it just didn't help. I think all of us here on the desk and the casters, they said the Camelot Kings, they woke up ready to play today.
Yeah, the Camelot Kings definitely did. Game number 2, macro play, definitely the name of the game. Big Man Tings being able to also go 5-0. That definitely helps the team out. 20k damage from him. Netroid being able to put out 24,000 damage on this Chiron. A great performance out of both of the carries, out of the entirety of the Camelot Kings. Cannot praise the team enough for the performance they had in game number 2. Again, game 1, fairly close between these two teams. Back and forth all the way through. Is that one little misstep at the mid-tier 2 that ended up turning the tide of game number 1. But essentially from minute 1 of game number 2, the Camelot Kings had complete control over the Titans.
Yeah, but Paul still had top damage, so at least he can go home
Okay.
with that. I'm just saying, if it was what 14-2. There's not a lot of high points I can take from that game from the Titans, but Paul had top damage, so he can sleep well with that, I suppose.
Silver lining, at least for the Titans mid laner Paul, is he's able to get the top damage. But for the Camelot Kings, we've actually got someone standing by for our post-game interview. It's the coach, Biggie, standing by. Thanks so much for stopping by. Congrats on your 2-0 victory. Now, talking to Genetics for the pregame interview, he said one of the troubles going up against the Titans is their ability to draft more than anything else. I mean, how does it, change up? Team to team, you obviously have different drafts, but whenever this is a team that Genetics showed so much concern on, I mean, what was the kind of the game plan coming into these guys?
I think the plan was we had a strat kind of like the Neath comp, which I think we won the game, but I wasn't that confident in the comp. We just tried to, I guess, ban away certain matchups, kind of like 1v1 matchups, and yeah, they're probably the hardest team to draft against from my point of view as a coach. So I thought they also had good drafts. Maybe we just played a bit better today as a team, I think, was the difference.
Yeah, it seems, game number 1 was a bit back and forth on there. And how does it kind of change up the drafts? You have Big Man Tings playing back from the UK, so he's obviously playing on ping. So does that kind of change up the draft dynamic a little bit?
Not as much as it used to. I think we kind of had to crutch a bit more last year because we had 2 players on ping. Right now we're just saying we want to play certain things, you just have to suck it up a bit more so that we can play good comps and we're not just playing, playing like much weaker comps because of our mid pick, and he didn't seem to have any problems today. So.
Well, seemed to work out for him so well. I mean, you guys get a 2 over to Tartarus Titans. Congrats on your win. I'll let you get back to the team to celebrate, and we'll see you tomorrow for your next set. Like how I put there, just tell him to, suck it up. You're just gonna have to play a god every so often. We were kind of joking in the green room, giving Big Man Tings Neath a god who can't really miss her ultimate, so you don't have to worry about that. Well, then you throw him on a god like Poseidon with Kraken. It's a big AoE circle, kind of hard to miss that, but still able to make it work out there. The Camelot Kings came up with a 2-0 to start our Saturday out. And maybe not the 2-0 or even the full set expectations that everybody had, but with it, Camelot Kings maintain their undefeated record. We can take a look at the rest of our day and the rest of our weekend. With that 2-0 by the Kings, that leads us into our second and final set of Saturday. That's going to be the Atlantis Leviathans and the Olympus Bolts, a very storied matchup, similar to the Bolts and the Dragons, where the Dragons were always getting the advantage over the Bolts in their matchups. Typically Dragons get favoritism. It was kind of the opposite here, where the Olympus Bolts were finding a lot of success over the Leviathans. It wasn't until really kind of the tail end of last year the Leviathans were starting to find some success. But it's an undefeated Bolts and a Leviathans team looking to find their second win of the phase.
Yeah, and the Bolts were sitting by and they got to watch the Camelot Kings continue their undefeated streak. So I imagine, their spirits have to be pretty high here, saying, we're not going to be the first ones to lose. So you guys, you got another thing coming. I imagine the Leviathans want to dethrone them as well. Been on a bit of a wishy-washy streak there for the Levi's. So looking at a team as the Bolts, you would love to be the ones that dethrone them and take them off that #1 seed. Tied for #1, I should say, with the Camelot Kings.
Yeah, it's always got to be nice when you're the team that puts the blemish on the record of an undefeated team. We'll see if the Atlantis Leviathans can do it in the next set, or will the Olympus Bolts be able to continue that undefeated streak. All that and more right after this.